Good morning, everybody. I'm here to talk to you this morning about anti-racist collection development. And when you hear from Becky, she will do the reader's advisory side, and then we will come together and answer questions about both. So before we get started, let's do a little defining of terms. So this is from the National Museum of African American History and Culture in DC. And they define anti-racist as no one is born racist or anti-racist. These result from the choices we make. Being anti-racist results from a conscious decision to make frequent, consistent, equitable choices daily. These choices require ongoing self-awareness and self-reflection as we move through life. In the absence of making anti-racist choices, we unconsciously uphold aspects of white supremacy, white dominant culture, and unequal institutions and society. Being racist or anti-racist is not about who you are, it's about what you do. So we hear a lot of talk about there's not a racist bone in my body, or I'm the least racist person you know, after usually doing something incredibly racist. And it's not about what you feel, it's about what you've done, or what you continue to do, or what you start doing. So anti-racism is very much about action. So with that said, once upon a time, there was this beautiful show called Falcon Crest. I watched this in real time. I was incredibly young, probably too young to be watching it, but I did. And, it was a beautiful show about wine country, very soapy, nighttime soap, but it was all about the same people. And when they did introduce diverse characters, they were stereotypical. Never, never, never were they in the ruling class. This is a story that we're all incredibly familiar with. But what happens when we turn it on its head? And now we have two other dramas that just premiered this year that are all about wine country, but they look a little bit different than we're used to seeing. And that's because we've moved forward enough where the rich ruling class can be anyone. It's not always just who we thought, but it can be anyone. And the drama can still be the same. The soapiness can still be the same. The treachery and backstabbing and sex scenes can all be the same, but the people who are portraying them can look very different and still be just as enjoyable as the people who watched Falcon Crest in the 80s. So I like to talk about giving old tropes new life. And all three of these books feature the trope of marriage of convenience. So you have the very historical Mary Ballow, and you cannot go wrong with Mary Ballow. So absolutely, if you are a romance fan and you like Marriage of Convenience, read that book. But also, you can have it from, again, with Wine Country, a Latinx point of view with Lush Money by Angelina Lopez, also a fantastic book. And with the Obergefell case in the Supreme Court making marriage legal between everyone, you can have a Marriage of Convenience book by Robin Covington from the LGBTQ perspective. These are all perspectives that bring something to our reading and to our life, but we haven't seen before. So like in the words of Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop, books are sometimes windows, offering views of worlds that may be real or imagined, familiar or strange. These windows are also sliding glass doors, and readers have only to walk through in imagination to become part of whatever world has been created and recreated by the author. When lighting conditions are just right, however, a window can also be a mirror. Literature transforms human experience and reflects it back to us. And in that reflection, we can see our own lives and experiences as part of the larger human experience. So a question that we get a lot is, what happens if we don't have this or that group in our community? It's not just dependent on demographics. So you don't have people who would make those books mirrors, but you would have people reading those books where it would be a window or a sliding glass door. So mirrors and windows are still important, but a book can be each of these to the same person by different access points. So you may not see yourself in the race of the main characters or the race of the authors, but you may have other characteristics of those characters or those authors that make that a window for you or a mirror for you, even if you don't look the same, even if you don't have the same religion. even if you're both immigrants but from different countries. The book can be each of these, window, mirror, or glass door, to the same person by different access points. So it's time to take the next step beyond thinking just about mirrors or windows and recognize that books written by diverse authors featuring diverse characters are for anyone all the time. So how do we get these books into the collection? Collection development on its just very basic level is about buying, displaying, promoting, and reading. But first, before we get to those last three, we have to do the first one. And when we talk about buying, it seems really simple, but there are separate parts to this. So you do have to discover the book. You can't buy what you don't know about. You have to locate the book, and sometimes that is the most interesting part. I won't say difficult, I'll say interesting or time-consuming part. And you have to actually purchase the book. And I add this because a lot of times our collection development policies are so restrictive that we can only buy from one vendor, and I'll talk about that in a minute, or we can only buy with a purchase order, or we put things in place that make it more difficult than it has to be to purchase books. So you need to be able to do all three before you can diversify your collections. But first, there's ground rules, because of course there are. And the first one, and the most important one, is you will make mistakes. If you do collection development, at some point, you will make mistakes. My favorite mistake was when I bought 85 copies of something instead of 5. You know, the 8 and the 5 on the number pad are right there together, and my fingers are a little thick, and that's what happened. I didn't get fired. I didn't die. Nobody died. We could send a good portion of them back, not 80 of them, but a good portion. The rest went to our book sale and life went on. You can best believe I didn't make that mistake again. I was a lot more careful about looking over my orders before I sent them off to be ordered. So you will make mistakes. You'll either win or you learn, but nothing here is life or death. You must be adaptable. People think that libraries are very slow to change, and in some ways that is true. But the amount of change in publishing and how libraries work with publishing over the last couple years, over the last 22 years that I've been a librarian, has been massive. There's been massive change. So you must be adaptable. Otherwise, it's going to be very frustrating. You must be curious. This job is about discovering things. So if you're not out there actively looking for things to add to your collection, you're not getting the most diverse materials for your patrons. So you must be curious. And it's kind of an overall all the time curiosity. Buying diverse materials is remarkably similar to buying materials by white, Christian, straight, cis people. The thing that happens is it takes a little bit more time to discover them. But other than that, it's remarkably similar, because your job is to open the floodgates for patrons, not be a gatekeeper. So discoverability of titles by diverse authors is getting easier. It is so much easier, especially with traditional publishers publishing more of it. But it's still going to take some extra work. So we should abolish the expectation that it's only worth doing if it's easy to do. Diverse authors or books that feature diverse characters don't always get the same marketing and promotion from publishers that other books do. So you're going to have to work a little bit harder to find those things. The good news is there, like I said, there are more of them out there. So think about, where are you looking for books? Who has your attention? Are you looking just at review journals? Are you looking just at vendor catalogs? Are you looking at social media? Where are you looking to find these books? And along with that, do you audit your orders? We talk a lot about collection audits for things that are already in the collection, but do you audit your orders on the front end so you know at the time of order what kind of diverse things you're seeing or not seeing, and then you can know where you need to look to find new things. And the progress train, like I said, just keeps moving along. Overdrive, Baker and Taylor, and Ingram all have tools for diversity audits, either available now or in the works. The devil is definitely in the details, however, about those. Be sure you know what you're paying for, what you're measuring. If an audit tool is counting diverse books differently than you want them to be counted in your collection, make sure that you know that going in so you can make whatever adjustments you need to make to the tool. Think about what you want the product to provide, because they will gladly take your money. And then when you use it, you find out it's not what you were looking for exactly. So you should know that going in so you can adjust on your end. If you're looking for books by diverse authors in fiction, you can start here. So this is Women of Color in Romance, which promotes the works of women of color in romance. Very clear what it does. It's a website, it's a Twitter feed, and they tell you what books by women of color have been released in this time period for romance. Most of my examples will be fiction-based because I am a fiction collection development librarian. I do think I managed to throw some nonfiction in for other people, but most of my examples are in the realm where I work, which is fiction, which leads me to romance class, which started as a hashtag and has grown tremendously. And it's for romance fiction by Filipino authors of romance in English. So there's no translation needed for these. These will fit directly into your collection of romance fiction. There's also LGBTQ reads. This is one that covers the gamut from adult to juvenile, fiction to nonfiction. You can go here and find new things, find old things, and have just a general sense of what things you can be adding to your collection. But also take advantage of the work your vendors are doing, because they want to separate you from your money and will gladly create lists to help that happen. So here is a list from April of last year, diverse romance and erotica. There was very little erotica on this list, by the way. So it was things that came out within the last 2 years or so that were super popular, some indie books and some traditionally published books, just right here in a list for you. So you could go through and see if you had them. If you didn't have them, you could add them. If you had other books by the same authors, you could see how they did. Just something to touch base and put, a group of titles together, 270 of them to be exact, that you can look through. That you don't have to search all of Ingram's vast catalog to look for diverse romance. Is this all that there is that exists? Of course not. But it's a group of recently published titles so that you can see how you've done, if you have these things. If you have none of them, it's a great way to start diversifying your collection of romance and erotic fiction. Here's a list of Indigenous peoples' graphic novels. And you don't have to wait till Indigenous Peoples Month to add these. They exist all the time, 22 products. You can go through and see, again, do you have any of them? If you do, how have they done? If you don't, is your graphic novel collection able to hold them? And my answer is probably yes. But you can't buy what you don't know about. And I'm going to keep coming back to that because it's very true. And the act of discoverability isn't just for patrons. Yes, we're here to help patrons discover things they don't know about, but for us to do that, we have to discover things that we don't know about and then add them to the collection. Baker and Taylor also does this in conjunction with Kirkus. You can see they have lots of different categories, and within those categories, lots of different formats, fiction and nonfiction, and these change regularly. I won't say frequently, but I'll say regularly. So you can go back and check this after a couple months and see what they've added or taken away. I will say some of these categories have very few titles. Like I think there was one that only had one title and it was great. You go in, you look at it. Do you have it? Nope, we can buy it. If it's something we need, if it's not, we can move on. But most of them have more than just a couple titles. So they are pretty helpful. So vendors have created things to help you identify titles, but just be aware that some vendors are better than others at actually carrying items, and especially when those items are by self and indie published authors. And this is something to keep in mind because although traditional publishing has made great strides in adding more books by more people, still a lot of diverse titles are indie published. And so if your vendor does not carry them, you might be out of luck. which is why it's like, I understand having exclusive agreements with vendors, and it may carry some benefit financially to you to do that, but it does not carry benefit of diversifying your collection. The more vendors, the more ways that you can identify titles and actually get them into your libraries. For instance, Talia Hibbert was everywhere last year with this series. It's her first traditionally published series. It made all kinds of bestseller lists as well as best of the year lists. And once people read these and absolutely fell in love with them, they wanted to find her backlist. And when you go to this vendor, Baker and Taylor, you find a lot of things that are audio, which are great, but not the actual physical books for the collection. So if you use Overdrive or Hoopla, you could find the ebooks, but a lot of times ebooks aren't the preferred way that people want to read. So you're thinking, well, these just don't exist in print and I can't get them, but that's not actually true. If you go to Ingram, you will find her complete backlist in print. So that's just an example of check multiple vendors. If you don't find something at one, there's a good chance it might be at the other. I do a lot of patron requests, and there's sometimes I can't find a book at either vendor. That's especially true with, I get a lot of requests from Covenant Christian. They're not at Ingram, they're not at Baker and Taylor. We still get patron requests, and so we have to go and find them. I find them at Amazon, I buy them from Amazon. Patrons are happy. It's all about making things available to people the best way that we know how. So in the real world, things are getting easier to find, which is fantastic. Effort, however, is still required, and we should think about placing the blame where it lies. So when we talk about things like science fiction, we talk about how low science fiction circ means that patrons generally don't like science fiction. We have some who love it, but by and large, low science fiction circ means low science fiction circ. But when we talk about books by authors of color, we say things like, nobody wants to read that book, regardless of who the author is, what the book is, what the genre or the subject is. It kind of damns all authors of color because no one wants to read that particular book. So we need to keep it consistent. And if you have low science fiction circ, it's low science fiction circ. If you have low circ by an author of color, you have low circ by that book. It's not damning everything and everyone who writes books similar. It's that one particular book. So is that it? That's the secret to diversifying your collection? No, nope, there is more. Once you have the books, and I'm just going to be optimistic and assume that you have the books. So once you have them, you also have to display and promote, because again, they're not getting the same marketing and promotion dollars from publishers that other books are getting. You're not seeing commercials for them like you see for James Patterson books. They're not on display at Costco like Janet Ivanovich books. So you're going to have to work a little to make people see that they're out there and see that even though the author doesn't look like them, the main character on the cover doesn't look like them, there's something in that book that appeals to them. Because when we recommend books and when we display and promote books, it's by appeal. Purchase is only half the battle. So once you have diverse items in your collection, then what? Well, don't ignore those items in your collection. Give them the same treatment that you give other books in the collection. Don't forget them when it's time to make displays and lists and every other way that you market the collection. And remember that books have multiple entry points. So let's celebrate all of them. For instance, yes, these books, there's 2 in the series now, feature a trans character. You can absolutely display this during Pride Month, but they're also legal thrillers. So when you make your If You Like John Grisham list, you can put these on there. They're also urban or set in New Jersey. So if you're doing a New Jersey fiction or a regional fiction, you can put those on there. And they also tackle timely issues such as sex trafficking. So if you're doing a timely issues in fiction list, you can put these on there. It's not just for Pride Month or just for books that feature trans characters. There's multiple entry points to this book. So I like to do a little thing called buy to try. So we buy things, we throw them up on the new bookshelf, or we throw them on a list or display where they fit and see what happens. And we know that books that are on display check out. This is not controversial. It's just what we choose to put on display is sometimes a little limited. Buy and die is what happens when we buy those books. We don't do any promotion. They do go up on the new bookshelf sometimes. And then when they're not new anymore, we put them in the stacks and let them gently fade away until they show up on a reading list in 6 months, a year, 3 years. And we say, nobody wants books by those authors. We did not give it a chance. So buy to try, not buy and die. And market all the collections, not just the physical collection. One of the best things about the ebook collection is we can see that books by diverse authors get checked out because they're not hidden away. They're right there on display, and people can look at them, read the blurbs, decide, oh yeah, I'm interested in this topic or this genre or this trope or whatever, and check them out. We don't give that same consideration to the print collections. So market all of them and let people see the whole range of things that you have on offer. So your book lists are a great place to feature things you've purchased, including diverse materials. And also, again, recognize that books by diverse authors aren't marketed to the same extent that other books are. So the built-in audience is already smaller. That's not a reflection of the worth of the book. A lot of times it's a reflection of people's misunderstanding of what's in the book, which is why we focus on appeal. So if your patrons love police procedurals, for instance, if they're on hold for the next Bosch novel, you can be giving them Rachel Houser Hall's series, starting with Land of Shadows, her Lou Norton series, hopefully soon to be a TV show. Both set in Los Angeles, both hard-boiled mysteries. They're a natural fit and a complement to each other, but a lot of people don't know that because they only see Rachel's book is written by a Black woman. So of course, that's not for me. If you like hard-boiled mystery novels, that book is absolutely for you. So while you're waiting for Bosch, you could be reading about Lou. If your patrons love former police officers turned independent investigators like Elvis Cole and Joe Pike, you can absolutely give them August Snow by Stephen Mac Jones or Broken Places by Tracy Clark. Urban thrillers, wisecracking PIs, very, very similar to the Robert Crace series. But again, both of these get much less promotion and marketing. So a lot of people don't know what these are about or who these feature. That's where our displays and our lists and our if you like this, you'll like that come in. But it's our job to know that. And if we don't communicate that to patrons, these books may get checked out, but a lot of people who might want them will miss the connection. There's diversity everywhere. We just don't always recognize it. And you don't have to wait until June to add LGBTQ books to any list where they might otherwise fit. Like An Unkindness of Ghosts, another book that was everywhere. And yes, you can feature it during Pride, but you can also showcase it when doing general science fiction, fiction about orphans, uncovering sinister plots, all things that also happen in this book. So we should also talk about decolonizing your thinking, which don't limit your diverse books to subjects you think diverse people should be experts in. Promote for the subject of the book the way you promote for author identity. And that doesn't mean we stop buying books about racism, sociology, civil rights, or BIPOC history. This isn't an either or proposition, it's a both and proposition. Because we absolutely still need books like Caste, Stamped from the Beginning, or So You Want to Talk About Race. We absolutely still need these books. But people of color can also be experts in textiles, or physics, or the cosmos, chemistry, personal finance, and yoga. Absolutely. So it's not limited to just the topics that we feel that people of color are experts in. So of course we're going to buy those books. We should diversify all the areas, not just certain areas. So after we do all that, what's left? Reading. You clearly don't have to read every book, although we try, but reading widely is hugely beneficial. Trying new authors, subjects, genres gives you a wider range of experience of what is available and what you can offer. If you're not reading more books, read more things about books so you have more to know about and offer, even if you don't have those particular books in your collection. So with the widening and flattening of reading, a lot of people are not relying on libraries as their only source of reading material. So there are times when people will come in and say, I read this book. What do you have similar to it? So you may not have the original book that they read in your collection, but if you're reading more about books and you're in the book atmosphere, as I call it, even if you don't have that book, you can find out things about that book and match it to books that you do have in your collection. And then, of course, when that patron leaves, you're going to look up that book and see if it's something you want to add, because clearly people in your service area are reading that book. So in the words of Sonali Dev, I'll leave you with this. So go out and buy a few diverse books, read them. Maybe you'll travel to fantastic and heartbreaking places, or maybe you'll find that hearts break in much the same way, no matter who you are. And just to know that, to feel that, it might be worth it. You are the valuable commodity in this situation. Books may be the picture, but you and your skills and abilities are the frame. Without you, none of this works on any level. Diverse books exist and have existed for years. It's not a trend. It's not a new thing. We've been here for years. You are the bridge that gets them into your patrons' hands. So buy them, read them, recommend them, and your patrons will do the same. Thanks for coming. Thanks for having us. And we'll see you back here for part 3.